Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. We're here in San Jose in California at ETSI NFV number 11. We've got to 11 already, would you believe it? And I'm delighted to be talking with Don Clarke. Don, you are the chair of the Network Operators Council and you've also been a year at Cable Labs now. 12 months in, what's it been like?
Well, is it already a year?
It is a year.
It's amazing, it's gone so quickly. Of course, I moved to the United States at the same time as I joined Cable Labs. And I'm having a great time there. So you know, it's a great role that I've got, and I work for an excellent boss, Chris Donnelly, and so great fun. So I'm having a lot of fun there.
There's been a lot of emphasis now you're putting on education and outreach, as it were, towards the industry itself. What do you mean when you talk about educating them? Because as far as I know, everybody I meet in NFV is highly educated in themselves and knows very well what's going on.
Yeah, except that you're biased because you've been to every NFV meeting, and it's great that you interview us and you interview those of us that have been heavily involved in it since the very beginning. But of course, as we extend the ecosystem and bring into the frame new players, then what is really important is that they get booted up very quickly on what NFV is about in terms of the technical challenges that we're dealing with. I mean, for example, you just read all the press, you think, oh, it's all open source, you know, what's the role of standards and why are these guys doing what they do? Well, it's really essential that we do what we do, but it's also essential that the open source guys would do what they do. So really there is an important role to be played here in educating the wider industry on the technical basis for NFV. And so that's that's been one of my ambitions for a while, is both extending out into the university community. So we talk about in I think it was white paper number 2, we introduced the idea that that academia should start to modify courses that bring in a new generation of students that are able to talk networks and talk software and bring those two things together. So that was one thrust, and we're doing that really quite well in the academic community. But then there's a wider industry community. What are the challenges technically for NFV, and what do we need to do to get those guys involved? So for a while, I've been thinking about a tutorial that we ourselves in the ISG would drive. And yesterday, we finally pulled that together. We were hoping to pull that together earlier, but we did actually pull that together yesterday. And thanks to TelecomTV for actually filming the session. So
a pleasure. So
we had a 2.5-hour session on tutorials, and that went really quite well. And the video will be available. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put something together at the SDN Open Flow World Congress in October. And so Mark Lum and the Layer 123 team have kindly agreed to host that, and we're starting to discuss how that might be pulled together. But the main thing is it's really to be targeting the audience. So for example, we might produce tutorials that aim at the open source community. We might produce tutorials that are aimed at particular groups of the industry that we want to get very quickly up to speed on the technical basis for NFV. So these are technical tutorials. They're not about status or market or anything like that.
Well, as we said off camera, the marketing's done. I think you can say, as far as NFV is concerned, everybody and his dog knows about NFV that needs to know about it now. Sure, you can outreach further, but I mean, it is time for the techie stuff to take the lead for the moment, I reckon, don't you? Yeah,
I think it very much is, and so that's the basis for the tutorials and how we move forward.
You mentioned open source and openness in general, and it's interesting, of course, that co-located with one open source meeting, and you're working with others as well, OPNFV and ONF and so on. How important is that, and how well do you get on with them?
Well, Heather and I know each other very well, and the OPNFV team, Linux Foundation, all those guys. But open source is extremely important, and Cable Labs in particular, for example, we're very focused on collaboration based on open source. And so my boss, for example, Chris Donnelly, he serves on the board of OPNFV, and a couple of weeks ago he was elected to the OPNFV Strategic Planning Committee. So we are very wedded to that activity. And when the OpenDaylight Summit was co-located with us here in San Francisco, that was really good. So what we're seeing is we've got both communities engaged with each other. There are people from here that are actually over at the OpenDaylight Summit meeting, and I'm going to go there myself on Thursday. And so the two communities are actually working closely together by being co-located, and that's really important. Also, we've got the joint meeting with the Open Networking Foundation. So the ONF and the ISG have had a very close relationship since the very beginning. I mean, in the first white paper, for example, we acknowledged the role of the Open Networking Foundation. So that's really important. And then OPNFV itself, we'll be working with them very closely this week as well.
One of the, this is the elephant in the room, Don, one of the things that people have been talking about, I know it's an underlying theme here, and I'd like to discuss this with you at the moment, is, you come into it's gone quickly, but you're coming to the end of that 2-year phase that was promised from the start. So, you've got to start thinking about it. I know that you are. So post 2016, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's a very important discussion, Martin. I mean, what comes after this 2-year phase, which ends nominally at the end of 2016, is very important. We need to provide clarity to the industry on how our documents will be maintained. So, we can't shoot documents out there and then walk away. I mean, NFV we're just at the beginning of the journey, aren't we?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think it was we had a keynote speaker this morning from Brocade. Who talked about this as a paradigm shift. Well, of course it is.
It sure is,
and none of us can really predict what networks will look like once they are completely buried in server infrastructures, for example. So beginning of the journey, and not anywhere near the end, wherever that takes us. And so I think that after 2016, without any doubt, there is going to be demand to first of all maintain our documents. The documents will hopefully be highly influential going forward. In that case, there will be new insights generated as a result of those, and we'll need to bring those back in to the community. But it won't be necessarily all about us. It's going to be about what is the role of other standards bodies. So there are very important standards bodies in this space. I could start naming a list. I don't want to do that because I might miss somebody off. But there's the open source communities, the other SDOs. How do we relate to them, and what do we rely on them to do, right? Yep. Because that's their natural remit. And what do we do in the community that's currently called the NFV ISG beyond 2016? So one thing we do want to do is get some clarity quite early on so that there is continuity and people can start planning for where to send their resources to carry on the work of NFV. Some of it will, I'm sure, will be done within the ETSI community. But will that be as a technical body? Will it be as an industry specification? One thing is for sure, we want to maintain the open ethos of the ISG. The reason we formed an ISG in the beginning was that it was open membership, so there's no fees. You don't have to be an ETSI member to be that. So that's very important for us. So that will be one of the criteria.
Most of the people I've spoken to, not just here but at previous meetings and in my daily work, NFV seems to be, most people seem to think it's a journey of 10 years. Would you agree with that?
I don't know where that comes from.
I don't know where it comes from.
I haven't heard.
It's been plucked out the air. Or
it's like life, isn't it? It's a journey. It's a journey with all kinds of twists and turns along the way. So, I think NFV is going to be part of the DNA of networking for forever. Really, I think clouds and networks will become indistinguishable. And what I'm interested in is how we will be influential on how cloud technologies evolve. We'll be figuring out how to put instances of the cloud in places where, right now they don't exist. And so it will be part of the DNA of the way in which the industry moves forward. So it's a never-ending journey, isn't it? And every step along the way, there's going to be interesting use cases that will arise that we never thought of.
I was intrigued when you said, nobody can envisage what the network's going to look like when it's completely NFV'd up and everything's changed and it's all cloud and et cetera, et cetera. Again, Don, as you know, I speak to a lot of people about this, and it does seem, despite the best imaginations and the most outward-looking scenarios, nobody really knows what's going to happen to the global telecoms infrastructure and many others as well, as NFV knocks into other industries and so on. What the world's going to look like. I mean, people didn't imagine what would happen with mobile phones. God knows what's going to happen with NFV.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that NFV enables, of course, is automation. So clearly, and this was the other thing about the original white paper, it was very important to BT when I was with BT at the time, that the message about automation was included in that white paper. And so, as far as I'm concerned, software-based networking, whether it be SDN, NFV, whatever we want to call it, allows an unprecedented amount of automation. So what I think will happen is that you'll take the human being out of much of the network infrastructure operations, and then they'll be replaced by autonomics and analytics that will enable us to adapt networks in ways we've never envisaged before. So for example, improvements in security can be envisaged in that kind of environment. improvements to fault management, self-healing, and then all kinds of things that are based on the network being able to adapt to the demands of applications. So things like IoT are facilitated by NFV, because you can adapt the network to whatever the endpoints need in terms of capabilities. I think the network world will be almost invisible, because the human being will be taken out of it to a large extent.
Fascinating. We do live in absolutely fascinating times. I take it you're going to be in Dusseldorf in a few months' time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. In fact, I'm going to be in London, Dusseldorf, and then my wife has insisted that we have a vacation, and that vacation happens to coincide with NFV number 12. So I'm actually going to miss an NFV meeting, but for good reasons.
Oh, well, that's good. So I'm going to say, well, I'll see you there in the autumn, but all being well, we'll be there, but you'll be on holiday.
Yeah, I'll be thinking about you, Martin.
That's very kind of you, Don. Don Clarke, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.